just kind of wanted to talk about the format of the talk a little bit. I know that I'm the one who's mostly doing the talking, but if you feel like you have any questions or you have anything to say, like if you've had experience with .NET templates or whatever, and you notice something, like feel free to share, and like discussion is always cool. So yeah. So my name is Olga. Olga, Orlia, whatever your mouth allows you to say. I am a lead software engineer on the platform team at Liazon, Willis Towers Watson, as however you know us by. And then, yeah, I'm one of the co-founders and a mentor at Inclusive Tech Buffalo, co-organizer of DevOpsDays, look at my shirt. And I have a ferret. Okay, so I kind of wanted to start off by giving you kind of the overview of why I looked into .NET templates. So this talk is about, kind of explaining .NET templates and how they're useful in multiple situations, including, streamlining your service creation, which we'll get to. But my original motivation for it was that at work, for years, we've had this monolithic solution, this giant code base, and we've been trying to decouple it for a very long time. And we practice domain-driven development, so a lot of the services within that monolithic database are owned by different teams. So because of that, we're always stepping on each other's toes. It's also not the best environment to learn, because when I first came to Liazon, I didn't really know, like I was a new software engineer. I came from an infrastructure background, and I was kind of like just thrown into that code. It was so frustrating, trying to like figure out what everything does and like where the domain lines are kind of drawn, but they're kind of loose. So yeah, as a result, the pull requests are really large and they involve a lot of teams sign-offs. I made a typo and I said sing-offs, but I didn't want to fix it because it gave a really great image in my brain of people having a sing-off when you're putting in pull requests. And then on top of that, there's continuous pressure from product or management or stakeholders to continuously pump out new features. So prioritizing breaking out services was really hard, and a lot of teams had developers on it that have never actually built any sort of .NET Core, ASP.NET service, whether it was .NET Framework either. And they just kind of, some of them are junior, or some of them are just like fairly new to that type of programming. So it became almost a mental block for a lot of people to get their service out of the monolith, because they think it's such a hard initiative, which it is in some cases, but I think a lot of people just kind of like tend to play it up a lot more because they don't know what actually is involved with it. So yeah, part of my role on the platform team is to be able to sort of facilitate solutions that will help us kind of move faster, help make our code more efficient, and then help deprecate certain tools and like save money, things like that, and research new tooling. So of course, I got that task. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking too fast, I'm trying not to. So yeah, we were kind of hoping at that point that we would be able to find something that would ease that process, would either release the mental blocks, or at least help teams not have to worry about it right now, so they can focus on features or other tech debt. So we were also hoping to, although we want teams to be autonomous, we also wanted to be able to standardize on some tools, because then we don't have to worry about having paying for multiple licenses for a tool that does the same thing as another tool that we're using. So we're trying to find a good balance. And so we were looking for something that would help us standardize that. And we would, like I said, try to introduce other tooling that might be able to replace something else that we're using that we're trying to get off of, like a service bus, or something that might be like .NET framework dependent. So I was kind of doing some research, and the thing that that I really liked when I saw .NET templates or I didn't really like. Well, yeah, the thing I really liked about when I was researching .NET templates is because they're already on my machine. They're already on everybody else's machine. If you have .NET Core 2.0 or above, you automatically have it on your machine. So there's nothing that you have to install that's extra. But yeah, and what it is basically, so the template engine, to create a template, you actually define some JSON. So you declare the schema, so it knows kind of where to pull the information from. And you can add different properties that would then tell the template, hey, this is what I want it to be. And then you can have like so many different parameters and options. I'll get to those later. It is open source, so if you wanted to poke around with it, you can. And yeah, so it could be used with anything that could be basically read in plain text. So I can use it with not just .NET, .NET specific things, but I can use it for my build automation. I can use it for Python files if I wanted to. I can use it for, like pretty much anything, any type of code that I need to write. So even though on top of everything, it gets packaged up using the .NET Core tool or the .NET new tool, or .NET back using .NET, when you actually go to invoke that template, there's no trace of anything .NET related unless you actually specifically want something there. So I thought it was really cool, and it could be really helpful, not just for my situation, but for others. And yeah, it can be conveniently packaged and distributed to any sort of NuGet feed. Yeah. So some of the cool things that templates allow you to do. They allow you to do some variable replacement. So one of the parameters that you can define is, say your service name. And you want, so when you build the template, you have some placeholder value there. And it's just another word. And you use that word throughout the template and with the thought that it was, or with the intention that it's going to get replaced. So when you actually put in your service name, you can actually use the service name that you type in to the command line, and it'll replace all those things. So you don't have to worry about find and replace or anything like that if you just open up some like pre-existing solution and you're just supposed to like poke around and change things. It does file inclusions or exclusions. So if you want to include a specific file and you want this to be, an optional parameter, you can include it. Or if you want it to automatically be included or excluded, you can define the actual, the criteria for that. You can generate ports, numbers, dates, GUIDs. So those can be really useful. So for example, one of the templates that I wrote was so my company, we're trying to pull the services out of the monolith, but some of them still need to run side by side on some virtual machines before we can put them into like PaaS offerings. And so because they're going to be running on the same machine as other services, they need to have a port assigned to them. You don't want to have different port conflicts. And a lot of the times, so teams basically, whenever they try to put out a new service, they have to reserve a port or kind of ask for a port from DevOps or something. So that way they know that nothing else is running on it. But sometimes they don't have that information at the ready when they're creating their template. So in the meantime, there still needs to be a port there in the install scripts, but they don't know what it is. So I could have it be generated for them for now, and then they can go back and replace it later. And that leads me to coalescing parameters, because they also give you the option to kind of to give different behaviors to a specific parameter. So if I wanted the port, and I actually knew the port that I wanted, I didn't need it generated, and I could, supply it in command line, then it'll use that port. But if not, if I don't supply anything, it'll actually generate one for me. And those are two separate parameters, but they work as one, which is really cool. So file renames is another. So file renames is slightly different than variable replacement, because the variable replacement part happens inside of the code or inside of the actual files. It doesn't actually rename the files themselves. So if you had, you wanted your service name to be in, your classes or your namespaces, but you also wanted it to be in the names of the files themselves, you can actually tell it to do both variable replacement and file renames for that. And then you can also do post template scripts. So these are really nice, because I've run into some issues where I needed it to do something after you invoke the template, but it's not something that you would put in a template. So you can actually define a script, or there's actually predefined scripts that you can use that will run after you start up your .NET template. And they also support placeholders. So say you wanted a directory structure, and one of the things that comes to mind is like there's a Microsoft recommended directory structure. I think there's like a gist on it by David Beller, but I have a link in it, or a link to it in my repo. And so we kind of want to take inspiration from that, and we want to be able to ensure that this repo structure is still there when somebody creates the template, so they're not like thinking about, oh, I'm going to put this folder here, this folder here. It's already organized for them in a good way. So sometimes I don't have files to put in those folders, but I want the folders to be there, so they know exactly where to put whatever future items into. And so because when I actually pack the template, or I install it, it doesn't preserve those directories, the empty directories. So in order for those to stay, I would use a placeholder sort of file, and I'll show you what that looks like. So one of the really cool things about .NET templates is they can you can use these preprocessor directives, the control statements, to add or remove bits of code. And at first, I thought that was limited to only languages that really use those. But later on, I came to find out, so they actually really improved their documentation, and you can actually use them pretty much anywhere. I can use them in a Python file if I wanted to. It doesn't have to be like C++ or C# or F# or anything like that. And what I would use these for is to add or remove bits of code. So not the actual files, but pieces of code themselves. So say I wanted to start up a specific tool for people to use, something like Hangfire, if I wanted to do background processing. So, but not every team is going to need long-running jobs in their service. So they might want it to be optional, but I want it to be there because I wanted it to be set up for them, ready to go, so they can actually start using it and not have to worry about wiring it up, which is really useful. You can also use computed symbols that get evaluated when you're processing the template. So you can like basically bake in an equation or a mathematical sort of like computation, and say you wanted to like pass in something that tells the template that this is you. Maybe you have sensitive information in your template. You shouldn't, but if you do, you know, you can pass something in, and then you can do a computation on it, and you can verify that, you know, this came from this person or something like that. I haven't used it, but I saw it and I thought it was really cool. So I thought I should mention it anyway. So there's a lot more that's there to it. You can, yeah, so their wiki is really helpful and it's put together really nicely, right? Sorry. And so you can read more about it, but basically you can go kind of through the side here and it'll tell you what parameters are available. It'll give you examples of how to use them. And this is still in that JSON file. And so if you wanted to know more about, say, the post-action registry, which is what I was talking about running the scripts, it'll give you different action IDs and different ways that you can use those scripts when you invoke a template. So it's very well put together. And like I said, it's gotten a lot better since I originally started working with it. Okay, with that said, there have been some pain points. And I mean, there aren't a whole lot. I mean, there have been a lot of kind of growing pains as I was trying to figure things out, but then I found like good ways to solve those problems or good solutions that were already there. But some of the pain points go around .NET packing, because when you want to pack your template, you're doing a NuGet pack. So if you have, say, like new spec files in your repo, it'll ignore them. So, and it won't necessarily ignore them. It depends on where you have the new spec files. It'll either try to consume them or ignore them. And if it ignores them, that means it's not added to your template. So if you wanted a new spec file for somebody to be able to package their service, to be able to be used as like a chocolatey install or something like that, they're either going to have to use the CS proj, or they're going to have to create the new spec files again. And sometimes, you know, I will create a template, even though it'll be for like a .NET framework project, and you can't really use CS proj for packing in that case, at least not that I'm aware of. So you have to stick with those new specs. So if they're not there, you're stuck creating them from scratch, and sometimes it could be a pain, especially if you've never done it before. So we want to include those. So one of the things that I used to kind of go around that is the file rename. So when I actually include it in the template, I'll give it the extension of, say, .newspec file instead of .newspec, and then it'll actually pick it up and it'll package it. But when I actually do a .NET New and I create a new API from it, and it'll actually rename the new spec file to new spec. So it'll look like nothing ever happened. It'll look like those have always been there. It all happens like behind the scenes, which is really cool. One of the other things that I kind of ran into is that .NET Pack will actually strip away the execute permissions on your executables. So like your shell scripts or scripts. And so in order to kind of get around that, that's where I would use one of those post-action scripts for. There is one specifically for modifying the permissions. So even though it strips that permission off, I can add it back on before you actually get the created service, which is cool. So yeah, so I've done enough talking about this because you can't. It's hard to visualize sometimes what I'm talking about. So let's go into demo time. Get it?
Had to
okay.
unmute just for that.
I like it.
Thank you. So, show. I am. So let's actually try to create a template. Just because, so I created a sort of a demo project as well, but I kind of wanted to go through some of the basics first before, and kind of like show you how to create a new template before I actually go into it. So let me think about wireless keyboards or Bluetooth keyboards. They disconnect after not using them for some time. Maybe. I just want to connect back to my computer.
Batteries also tend to die at the least opportune times.
Yeah, but the thing is, I just charged this keyboard. So I'm thinking it might just be like the Bluetooth. Okay, no problem. I'll wire it up. 1 second. Or I can use my laptop keyboard, but who does that? I don't think I have enough real estate on here. Yay. All right. Also, I type extremely slowly when I'm live coding or trying to show people something. So just saying, it's not always this bad. Oh wait, I didn't want to go that deep. Oh yeah, it'd help if I gave it a file name. Okay, so this is basically where I want my template to be, right? So I'm starting from scratch. I don't exactly want to start a new project here. I want to create another folder and start a project within that because I want to do the packaging out here, and I want that to be separate than the actual project that I'm doing. I made that mistake the first time. I actually like wrote out an entire API and like with all the stuff that I wanted to put in there. And then I realized, hey, I have to pack this and I have to like add all this other stuff to it. And it was just like acting very wonky. So don't do that. So we'll create, you know, a new folder. We'll call it test. And here, you know, I'm gonna already use an existing, or I can use an existing template, or I could just create a file if I wanted to. So I'll create a file. So say I want a Python file. And I just wanted to do some print statements. Oh my God. I'll close it. And I'll run it just to make sure it runs. Okay, it runs, it outputs stuff. So now, you know, maybe I want it to output something else, or maybe I don't want DevOpsDays is lit in there. Maybe, even though it totally is, but maybe I don't want to see it for whatever reason, or I can't go and it makes me sad. Just kidding, I'll be there. So I want to create a template out of it, and I want to have it output something else. So in here, I'm going to create a template directory, and I'll call it .template. Just making sure I have the naming correct. I always like double check just to make sure, even though I've done this so many times. So yeah, I want to call it template config. First, I should probably tell it what to do. Or you know what? Yeah. I'll make the directory. So I should have two files, or a folder and a file in here. So in the template config directory, that's where I'm going to put my JSON file. That's where when I do .NET Pack or .NET New, it's going to see whatever directory the template config directory is in. That's where it's actually going to start the template from. So even though you might have done even though you might have like a solution or another project outside of this, it won't actually pick it up unless it's in here. So call it template.json. Oh, whoops. So in here, you know what, why am I using Vim? 1 second. I'll use VS Code instead. And I actually already had some stuff in here from a template pack that I was doing, and I'll kind of go into that a little bit later. So I'm going to open my demo testing boop test. Actually, yeah, let's open up this directory. So you see I have the template config and the Python file. And so I'm going to paste some stuff in here because I don't want to bore you by typing everything out. So some of the things that you want to actually include in your template.json is, well, first of all, the schema. So you want to be able to define that, and it gives you like nice, code completion when you do that. So it'll have my name in there. I'll tell it it's an API. It's not really an API. These are some tags. And then I'll tell it that it's Python. And then I'll call it test template. If I can type. So right now, I'm not actually doing anything in there, right? I'm not defining any parameters. I'm just kind of telling it, you know, what to call the template itself. And so now I'm trying to exit like I'm exiting out of Vim. So now if I go back here, I can actually install this template. Mind you, it's not going to change the Python file or anything because we didn't do anything. And so, but at least you like know how it actually works. So to be able to install the template, I would do a .NET new. Well, first of all, let me just run .NET new just so you would see what the output looks like. And you can see that, you know, it kind of gives you some options that you can use, or it gives you some templates that already come pre-installed. And so you would be able to actually like bootstrap something faster. So to install a new template, I'll do a .NET new -I, and you know, because my template is in this directory, I could just do this. And even though it looks like the same output, what you would notice is on the top, I would have my new demo template. And as I called it test template, you'll see the short name, you'll see the tag for the language, and it's Python. And those are the rest of the tags that I have in there. So in order to be able to use this template, I would just do .NET new, and I would use the short name. Oh, and it's trying to, because I'm in the same directory, it's trying to override my file, so I'm not going to do that. That was bad. So I'll run that. So if I look at it, you can see that my template config is not there anymore because that gets ignored. I mean, it doesn't get ignored, but it gets used and it knows not to actually output that. And then we have our Python file. And if I run it, it just gives me the same things. And I didn't change, like I said, I didn't change anything. So I did something very similar. And I have another directory where I actually made changes to. So I created what's called a template pack. So you can actually, instead of installing every single template one by one, you can install multiple templates at once if they're defined, if they all have their respective .NET config, or not .NET configs, template configs, or template JSON files, so that it knows to differentiate where each template starts and where it stops. So if I show you, so I have some artifacts from the packaging that I did. So so you can ignore the obj-bin and dstore, but the three things that you have to focus on are kind of the Python, the Terraform, and the package settings.json. Package settings.json is the file that I'm using to pack the templates. But if I look at Python, so I have something very similar, and in here, if I wanted to look at the contents of my Python file, you can see that I actually have these little if statements here. And that's how you can sort of use the preprocessed directive like control statements in Python. So these, when I actually invoke a new script, gets ignored if I set DevOpsDays to false. If I set it to true, then it gets added. And if we look at the template config, you can see, so in here, I have a couple more things. So I have all of this, which I defined earlier. And now I have the symbols parameter. So this gives me a parameter that I can pass in command line to, you know, basically toggle DevOpsDays Buffalo statement on or off. So if I wanted to, and then I have some files that I want to exclude, like I don't care about those bin or obj files or anything like that. So I just kind of kept that in there. So those are all the files that you don't want added to your template. I'm trying to, so if I make a new directory, so say I want to install this template pack because it has both Python, and if I look at Terraform, it also has a template config file. So I'm not going to pack it yet. I'm just going to install it the way it is because I don't have to like host it anywhere. I just want to run it on my machine. So then I would want to install it first, right? So, which I guess I should have done it earlier. .NET new -I and so we just want to do a template pack, right? Because it's going to install both templates. So now if I look, you can see that, okay, first of all, we still have that other template installed, but we also have the Terraform template that came up, and we also have wherever the Python template is. Oh, right above it. So we have that template. And so new .NET new Python template. And so I didn't say anything, but if you looked at the template config, it had a value, a default value. And that default value, I believe, was actually, if you wanted to see what parameters are available, you can do a .NET new. You know what? Yeah, we could do that, -- help. And it'll actually show you what parameters I have defined. So it'll have some like predefined options, but it'll also show you what was defined. So it tells you that I defined this parameter and that I could toggle it on and off. So it's true by default. But if I wanted to have it not show, I would just say -d or a -DevOpsDays, and I will say false. What? Oh, because I already created it. So yes, I do want to override it because I want to override it with my new value. So I'm just going to do --force. So now if I run Python on that Python file, you can see that it says, I'm a Python file, bye. There's no DevOpsDays in there because they're sad they can't go. So it's really cool. Now let's get to something a little bit more beefy. So now that we know how that kind of works, I defined a repo, or I created a new repo. Let me pull that up. In my GitHub account, which I hardly use. Well, I use it more now. And I call it .NET template demo, right? So I actually have it open here in code, so I have it pulled down. So it looks a little bit beefier. So I used one of the templates that's already existing in .NET New, the new API template. And with that, it just does a little bit of bootstrapping for you, and it gives you like this weather controller. So you have, so this is your API controller. I wouldn't worry about putting anything in there because if you're creating an API, I probably don't need to like put placeholders in there because you're doing your own business logic, you're defining your own endpoints, and if you're creating an API, you're probably doing a lot of thinking before you actually create it because changing things later on, especially if you have to like version or anything like that, is painful for multiple people. So really put a lot of thought into your APIs before you create them. But anyway, it does create like an example API, and I just kept it in there, and an example class. So what I actually did was I defined the structure. So I created this .NET template demo folder, and then inside of it, so this .NET template demo folder, and then I created another .NET template demo folder. I should have probably thought about the naming a little bit better. So I created it to put my template config in here, because this is what I actually want to be included, right? Just this folder. Everything else has to do with packing and, you know, the repo itself. So I put a couple of things in here. If you look at, so I kind of modeled that repo structure that I was talking about, and I kind of broke it up into build, doc, source. I added a Terraform directory because I wanted to stand up resources in Azure. So I wanted it to be like as automatic of a process and as end-to-end as I can make it. So, you know, from the get-go, if you look at program.cs, I changed a few things. I changed my app settings files. Probably not the best naming for them, but I have some logging that I configured. And because the file paths are different on both Windows and Linux, I created two separate app settings files for them. However, I could have used a parameter to ask whether this was Linux or Windows, and I could have had it replace that specific value if I wanted to. I didn't get that far. So I wanted some startup logging, so I added Serialog because Microsoft's logging isn't exactly like geared for that, at least not before you actually build the host. And so, and if you're not familiar with .NET Core, that's okay. I'm just gonna try to like give you sort of an overview of what every part, like what all these parts are doing. So I'm logging the startup, and you know, I definitely want to catch any exceptions that are happening at that startup. In the actual startup CS file, I'm actually wiring up a lot of stuff, right? So I wanted to use application insights. So there's, I guess I could use it locally or I can use it in Azure, but I can monitor my, my requests that way. So I wanted to be able to pipe that information into application insights. And for it to do that, I had to wire it up here, or at least with this bit. This was already here, adding the controllers, adding health checks. I actually ended up adding the health check. And then I wanted to add Swagger for my API documentation. And what that is basically like another endpoint for you to go and look at everything that you have, I guess, defined in the API. And I'll show it to you. And yeah, I added a few things here. So this is still part of that that Swagger or OpenAPI. And then I added this health check endpoint, and I wanted it to, instead of just giving me a healthy or degraded, I wanted it to come back in like JSON format. Maybe I want to consume it somewhere else at some point. So I added that. I mean, this code is by far like very simplistic, but also can be kind of messy if you see more of it. It could, like a lot of the stuff, well, this is fine, but a lot of the stuff going forward could be done better. So yeah, I have my CS Proj file, so I added a couple of things in here, and none of these are optional. These are things that we want every API to have. I added the scripts directory, and because I have no scripts yet, I added a placeholder file in here. So when I pack this, it will actually ignore that placeholder, but it'll still give me the directory. So if because if I pack it without it, then I'll actually lose that directory. And then, you know, some poor developer who's never done this before is gonna think, okay, well, I have scripts, where do I put them? And try to kind of go through the mess of things. Yeah, I didn't really add anything here. Okay, so I have my API. I also added a couple of other things. So I added like a sample test. It doesn't really do anything. It always passes. But just to show you that there should be a test there. You know, once the business logic is written, there's going to be a lot more things to test. And I also added a build project using this awesome build automation tool called Nuke. I don't do it justice. If you have a moment to learn about it, there's actually a really good YouTube video on it. But it makes build automation so much more simple, and you can do a lot with it. And you can like even generate pipelines and things like that. But I'm just using it for a simplistic purpose and for client generation. So look at this. This is yeah. It does what I wanted to do for now. So yeah, it basically it does a clean restore compile, and it tests, it runs the tests, it generates my clients if I want to, if I actually want to generate the clients. And because why do I need to generate clients if I haven't if I haven't like put in my controller yet or like defined my API yet? So I didn't actually create it in the template, but that's why I would rather have it generated, because it's not necessary at this point. And it's publishing some projects, except for the tests or build project. So I have that. I added a docs folder, and I'm kind of using this ADR format, this architecture decision record, because I think it's a really great way to document your stuff, especially like, I know that sometimes I write my code and a year later I go back and I think, what was I thinking? Like, this stuff it makes no sense. So it would help to have some sort of like decision record on why, say, I chose this tool or why I chose to, you know, set up my code this way. Have it at the ready. So I added like just an example here, but there's a link in here too if somebody actually uses it and wants to find out how, like, what the format is. I also added a Terraform folder. So this is where I'm actually, so I'm planning to release this to app services, to like web app starting on Azure. And for that, I also want to like create application insights for it to work with. So I wanted to create a resource group. I wanted to create my web API, and I wanted to create my application insights. And I want this done automatically if I can. So Terraform does a really good job for that. And sometimes you might not want to keep it with a repo. I've seen people advocate for having it in one giant mono repo, because what if something happens, you have to, you know, destroy or stand up a resource again where something happens and that resource is being relied on, or like say it's an app service plan, which is basically a virtual machine that other services that the web apps actually run on. So say that, you know, your infrastructure team or your DevOps team, or they need to, for whatever reason, destroy it, or it like some disaster happens and they need to recreate it, but they don't actually have the stuff to put into them. So they don't have the app services that go into them. So you still have to involve other people or look at like different repos in order to be able to use it. However, it's also very convenient because to have it in the repo, because that way other people, or at least your team, is as autonomous as it can be. It owns the process end to end. So, and it's nice to be able to have like that responsibility for each individual team, and not have to like rely on a central team to be able to use those resources or like configure those resources. So I have that. And I also have my GitHub file. So the .NET.GitHub workflows, this is basically what's defining my GitHub actions. So GitHub actions is a way to automate automate your workflow. So if you wanted to build and release that way, you can. It doesn't happen locally. It happens like once you actually push your code. And so it runs in here. And you can see, like, you can define different properties and to tell, or like different triggers and things like that to tell it when to run. I currently have, so this specific action actually just automates. So every time I push to main, which I'm choosing to use main instead of master, so that's like one thing that I'm changing as well, because it's harmful to some other people and it's easy to change. But anyway, so anytime I push to main, which is my default branch, it fetches my Git history. It makes sure I have .NET Core on there, and it actually calls well, I actually don't have it build and publish there. Originally, I had it like do a .NET build, .NET or like restore, build, and publish. But because I have it defined in Nuke, I don't need to define it up there as well. Like, I could just do the same thing locally and remotely. So I'm doing that. And then I'm actually deploying it to my web app. And so in here, this is like one of the few manual steps that you still have to do. But in here, once you run your Terraform apply, which builds the resources, and you actually need to be able to give it permission and like tell it how to deploy to your web app. So because I wanted to automatically deploy after publishing, I can, there is something that you can download from the app service itself that you can actually add as a secret in GitHub. And it would be in your settings, secrets, and you know, you have your Azure Web App publish profile. So basically you're passing it in to the GitHub action, and you're telling it which package to actually push to the web app. And we'll see that in action. So that's basically it. Well, actually, I still have, you know, the basic things that you would want to have in your repo, like a git ignore. So you want to ignore certain files. So that's already like generated for you there with the template. These things are Nuke specific, so they get generated, and these scripts basically do very similar. They do a lot of like the bootstrapping, and because Nuke is not installed on a lot of the agents that this happens on. At least this gives me a way to use it, because it's a command line tool. So if you're looking back at my actions and you're looking at what it's doing, oh, this isn't it. This is my other action. If you look at, if you look at my action, you can see that it runs that shell script. This is also why I had to put that executable bit back in, because when I packed it, it stripped that away. And then when I tried to, when GitHub Actions tried to build my stuff, it was complaining that I don't have permissions, I don't have access. And I didn't know, like I didn't notice that that was getting stripped until then. So learning opportunity. Yeah, and of course I have my Git version. Now, normally your Git version YAML file, so Git version is used for semantic versioning of your stuff, your assemblies, your packages. So because when you're, there is a default style. So if you're using master as your main branch and you don't have a main branch, you probably don't need any of this stuff, like anything from the top. And so all of this stuff is basically overriding the defaults, just to be able to use main in the way that master was being used. So don't get like too hung up over this. It's not a lot of stuff. So most of the time, your Git version will just have something like this. So I have a lot of that stuff. So that's inside the actual template. So if we go outside, all of this stuff has to do with the packing, or not completely. So because my repo actually starts up here and not in the .NET template demo, I have, of course, my Git file or Git folder here. And I have a different action defined in here. And this one basically just does packing. Like, it doesn't really, it doesn't really need to build anything. Well, I should probably like run tests in there because you can actually test your templates. But in this case, all I'm doing really is just packing it and then telling it to use Git version. And so it knows how to version my packages. And then I have an API key from my Get, which is the package manager that I chose to use after using GitHub packages and not having a good time with it. Because I use this regularly, I'm pretty familiar with it, so I got like a free trial. But anyway, so you can see that all of these packages for the template get used in, or like they get pushed up here automatically by the pipeline. And so you can see, I deleted a few. I went through a couple of iterations. So every time I actually do this, it goes up a patch version. And I mean, once I actually decide I want to release a stable, I can increase the version that way. But for now, it'll just keep doing this. Also, I'm pushing the main this entire time. Probably not something that you're going to do. You're probably going to have like a branch off of that, off of your default branch. And so if you have that and you're pushing those, it'll version them slightly differently. But it's not about this. It's about templates. So, so yeah. So I have my package settings.csproj. So that's basically telling me what to pack. I want to include everything in the .NET template demo directory, but I want to exclude these like pesky directories that I don't care about that get generated automatically. And so, and then I have the README. And this README is what you see in the repo itself. It just has links to some useful information. So all of this is basically only .NET template related. And all of this stuff is just some of the stuff that I changed and where you, in the actual API and like where you can read about it. So if you're curious about the project structure, or you're curious about health checks, or you want to look into Nuke, or you want to look into GitHub Actions. So a lot of these are where I actually got my information from, because sometimes like the default source might not tell you what you need to know, or it might tell you, but you have to like dig. And so I try to kind of dig up some of that stuff and go straight to those pieces that I use the most, at least for this. So yeah, so let's see it in action. So I've been talking a long time. So now I didn't make any changes, but I want to see what it does. Because I had already pushed this, I had already packed it, and actually let me pack it and push it just so you can see it. Actually, I don't need to because it automatically does it for me with GitHub Actions. So I'm gonna just make a small change, maybe like a white space change somewhere, so you can see how it works. This is just the template, okay? This is not the finished service. And this is why I think templates are so useful, because teams don't have to like worry about trying to figure out how all of this works. You can actually just standardize. Just like you can standardize on resource names if you're looking at the Terraform file, and you could pretty much like call it, say you wanted to define a prefix and you wanted to have like API at the end, but this is the part that's going to get replaced. But anyway, so you could standardize on some namings. Sorry for the tangent. Okay, so I'm gonna actually just change something in the README file. Okay, and And I'm going to commit. And I'm going to push it. And so this is me packing the template. And so if I go in here, you go into GitHub Actions, you can see that now I have this running. And all it's going to do is, like I said, kind of get Git version, set up .NET Core, and make sure that I can push this to my Git, my package feed. And a lot of the times, you'll probably have a company that that might have a deploy user, and that will already have some credentials stored in a secure place, and it'll give you like the actual, like the name of the credential to where you can actually pass it in, but you never actually have to know what that credential is. So sometimes you don't actually have to create those yourself. You might have to create them. Like I had to create a lot more stuff than you typically would if you were just consuming the template. So it's there, it's pushed. So now we can go back to, where am I my Git? Did I close out of it? How's everybody doing so far? I know I'm doing a lot of talking. Is this like, are you able to keep up okay, or good? Good, cool. Well, anyway, wait, that's not what it is. Not mygit.com. Anyway, I'm already signed in. So you can see, so if you actually go to feed activity, you can see that this was pushed just a minute ago. So I have it there. And because I have it configured as a source for my packages locally, I can actually just do a .NET new -I, and I could just put in the name of the package. Because all of that other stuff I had already configured, probably because I needed to use it for something else, right? Because realistically, I'll probably have other packages that I need to pull from here. So I'll go to .NET template .demo to install it. See what happened. Build. Oh, because I can't spell. That's not how you spell it either. Okay, work. Okay, so I have it here. This was the one that I just created originally, and I stupidly named it the same thing, but this is our Python template. This is the new template that was just added. So I want to know how to use it. I want to know what parameters I have available. So I'm going to do a .NET new, and it's called demo template. I'll use the short name, and dash help. So it really exposes only two parameters for me to use. The service name, which is required, and that I have defined just so we can name the service whatever we want it to be, not just .NET template demo, because I don't think that you want your service to be called that. So I'm going to pass in a service name, and then there's also another flag that basically tells it to, I called it use automation because I had it add or remove three things. I had it, if it's false, it doesn't include Nuke, it doesn't include GitHub Actions, and it doesn't include Terraform. So if you just wanted to create a service and play around with it, you like didn't really care about all of that stuff yet, you don't have to use that switch. And I mean, I could define more switches to kind of make them individual, as well. And it's really cool because, so like, for example, Nuke, it is another project within my template, right? And because it's another project, it's included in the solution. So I could use those preprocessor assemblies to tell it to include or exclude that project. So if I use automation, or if I don't want to use automation, it will not add that build project to my file. And so those look sometimes a little bit different, as you saw with the Python file. There were 2 slashes in front of it. So it's actually documented what you can use with what files in the wiki for .NET templates. So if you're ever not sure about how to include or exclude a piece of code from a specific file, you can always look at that. Okay, so you know, I'm just gonna give it a service name. I want to use automation. But you know what? First, I want to create a repository, right? Because I want to use automation. I want to be able to push it to some repo remotely. But I don't have a repo yet. So that's one of the few things that I can do that I should do manually, even though you could theoretically like have a script that runs, you know, like hits the API and has a create a new repo. Actually, I don't need to do that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to, wait, that's not where I meant to go. Repositories. As you can see, I don't use it that often. So I want to create a new repo and I want it to be public. What should I call it? I don't know. Maybe it's too long of a name. I don't know if that's going to cause any issues. But anyway, I'll call it DevOpsDays. Just kind of going with the theme here. I don't want to add any README or gitignore or anything like that because all of that stuff is already generated for me in the template. So I'm going to create the repository. And so now I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to, where am I? So I'm going to change directory. I'm going to create a new directory. I'll call it DevOpsDays. And I'll switch into it. So I'll do, well, first of all, I probably want to initialize it as a Git repository. So I'm going to initialize my empty repository. And you know what? I probably want to change my branch name at this point. So I'm going to check out main because that's what my automation is around. So it's empty. Nothing's in here. So I'm going to do a git new, or not git new, .NET new, .NET template demo, and I'll pass it in a -s if you can see the short name. You can actually change these short names. So if you don't look like the generated ones for you, you can actually specify a different letter. So I just kind of kept this one the same, so it gave me 2 letters. So I'm going to call the service name DevOpsDays. And so I'm going to hit enter. I want the default value for automation. I want all that stuff here. So I'm going to open it up here just so we can see it better. I'll open up the solution. Actually, no, I should probably open up the file system. But anyway, I can always change that. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this. So we're in testing. We called it DevOpsDays, and we want to open up the solution. Create a new window. Anybody getting tired yet? So we'll wait for that to load. And actually, let's look at the file system first, just to see what it is. So this is just generated just because I'm using JetBrains Writer. And so that actually didn't get added until I opened this up. What's this? Oh, I had, me too. Hold on, something's weird. I feel like something got packaged that shouldn't have. I swear this was not happening before, so. Okay, I'm just gonna delete it.
That's not part of your solution. I think it's just linked.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna ignore it. And so what I have here, as you can see, I don't have any packaging stuff on here. I have my GitHub workflow, and that's exactly the automation piece, not the packaging piece that we were using to actually like package the template. So I have my build project. I don't want to run it yet because I haven't pushed my changes yet, and it's gonna try to use the remote. Well, yeah, I don't want to edit yet. I want to make sure that my resources are built first. And this is probably something, if there's an order to some of these things, you probably want to mention it in some documentation. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my resources. So I'm actually going to go to Azure. So I pre-created a storage account, and so I pre-created a resource group, a storage account for the Terraform state. I'm not going to explain what that is quite now because it's not about that. And I've created an app service plan for me, like that VM, for me to actually push my app service to. And then a VNet, but I'm not using it, so I should probably deleted it. Okay, so I'm going to push to that stuff. And if you look at my my main, it already it's going to create this DevOpsDays resource group, and notice that it's in lowercase, so you can actually change the casing with one of the template parameters. If you needed it to be an uppercase only or a lowercase only for some other thing that you're doing. And in this case, I want it, even though I put in the service name as camel case, I ended up having the lowercase for the parts that I wanted to be lowercase. So it's creating the app insights, and it's creating the API. And this is all part of that same thing. So I want to go to my Terraform file, and I want to initialize it first. So I'm going to do Terraform init, and that's going to initialize the backend. It's going to create a directory in Terraform. That's one of the few ones that we were ignoring because we didn't want to add it because it has to get regenerated. So now I want to see what kind of resources I'm building. So I'm going to do a Terraform plan. So like, I know this part is not automated, but there's only like 3 commands that you have to run for Terraform, or even 2 in order to be able to deploy it. You don't actually have to write any of the code because all of the code was already pre-written, and that could save developers a lot of time. So it's just gonna tell me what kind of resources to create, and we know it's gonna create 3 resources: the resource group, the app service, and the application insights. So we have that, and we're happy with it. So I'm just gonna do a Terraform apply to allow it to create the resources in Azure. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I already looked at it. Is everybody following along so far? Somebody say yes or no? Is it good? Going too fast? Going too slow?
Good
I'm
speed,
still
I think.
following.
Okay. Okay, great. And if any of this stuff doesn't make sense to you, anybody else, feel free to kind of reach out to me and I can explain a lot of this stuff in more detail, because I'm trying to omit certain details because I want to focus on the templating piece. But if any other thing that I might have implemented might interest you, I'm happy to discuss it or point you to like good documentation where you can find out more about it. Okay, so if I go back to Portal, so because I created a new resource group, you won't actually see the resources show up in here. If I wanted to go to my resource groups, you can now see DevOpsDays resource group is now there, how we called our service name. And it has the 2 items that we built. It has the API and it has the application insights. So we go into the API. Remember, we haven't actually pushed anything to it yet. So if we click on it and launch it, it'll give us a default page. It won't actually give us the API itself. So, okay, so I'm gonna commit this just because I want to make an initial commit first in order for things to run smoothly after that. Oh, actually, before I commit this, one of the things, like I mentioned before, is this, if I looked at my other repo, that profile that I have to add to my secrets for it to know where to deploy to and the access to be able to deploy it. So I'm going to get this published profile. You can actually use command line to do this if you have Azure command line. If you wanted to create a script that does it, you could probably do it too. If you don't mind hitting the GitHub API, I think there's still a way to do it. It might be a little bit cumbersome, but it's just like a click. So this is, I'm just gonna choose, I don't know, text edit for this. So this is the generated profile. I'm gonna have to do this every time I actually create an app service. It's not the same if I decide to destroy it and create a new one. Oh, geez. And I want to go back here and I want to go into my settings and secrets, and I want to add that new publish profile. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it from what we have defined in the template demo. And you probably want to have this like step documented if you don't have a script to do this. And I'm going to go into GitHub and see what. So this is what I need it to be called. So it knows. Please keep looking at me. Sorry. So it knows what to actually pull, what secret to pull. So I'll call it that, and I'm gonna add it because once I push to remote, it's going to automatically pick up that workflow and it's going to try to push to the app service. This is why I didn't want to commit and push yet, because it's going to fail otherwise. So now that we have all that set up, I can go back to the DevOpsDays repo and I can do git add. So we're adding all of this stuff in here, right? So I want to make an initial commit before I run anything. And so I'm adding all of these things, and that's fine. Okay, so it's actually, I'm not sure if I'm tracking the remote branch yet. So I have it committed locally, but I still have to add this remote to my, so it knows where to push. Wait. So yeah, I copied that. Gotta get that URL again. Just gonna, what? Okay, I just didn't have, so I'm just gonna use the GUI to copy and paste just to make sure I actually have it copied. Because whenever I want to copy and paste, I will press like Control C or Command C like 5 times just to make sure I have it copied. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so git push origin main, since we're on the main branch now. And so you might notice we didn't really build locally. I just wanted to make sure, because of the way that I have it set up right now, I have to actually push to remote in order for it not to fail on me, because of some Git or Git version settings. So, but now that I pushed it to remote, I could happily build it here, or I can watch my GitHub action. So if I refresh this, I should have code up here, and I do. And then if I look at actions, I actually have something running already. So I didn't have to select it. So like if I'm using Azure DevOps, which is a similar tool in this case, I actually have to select the pipeline from a dropdown from a GUI in order to use it. And so like, this is nice that it was just able to automatically pick it up and just deploy. And we can see the steps that it's doing. So yeah, it's on the nuke step already. And we can see it as it happens. And we're not running any tests because that's, I mean, I could actually add it. That's just something I didn't add. But there is a test target in there, so you can run tests, even though they don't do anything except always pass right now. So you can see that the web app deploy completed successfully. So if we go back here, and we open it up, it might need to refresh, or I might have to, yeah. So perfect. This is not a bad error message. We just don't have anything for it to point to by default. So you know how I had Swagger defined, and I also had a health check defined. So I can actually go to any of those. So let's go to, so if we go to Swagger, you can see that, well, it's taking a while to load. You can see that it's actually like trying to pull something and it's not giving us an error. And you can see that controller in there. So you can see what we have available, in this case, just weather forecast. And you can try it out and you can execute. So if you actually go back to application insights, it's great out here because I'm using, I'm deploying to a Linux or to Linux instead of Windows. And it's grayed out, but it actually is still piping to application insights. So if I actually go back to the resource, you should see, once it loads, you should be able to see, if you can see like some spikes, you should be able to see performance. It kind of gives you, okay, so I don't have anything yet. Let me refresh it and see if it sends it. Or maybe some failures. Okay, so it counted that 404. So it saw that I actually, yeah, it just took a while. But you see that I'm actually able to, like, it's keeping track of my requests. So you know it's fired up. So that's good. So basically, now what you have is you started from a template. You had to go through a couple of steps. Like I know that there's some commands to run and there's an order to go in, but you went from just using a template to already having your API deployed. So, and you didn't even like actually touch the code yet, right? So, and a lot went into this. Like, I know it's not beautiful code. I know there's definitely ways that I can make it much better. But for all intents and purposes, for this demo, at least, like, there's still a lot of troubleshooting to go through when especially when you're new to something as well, and you're trying to spin up a service and you're trying to create this template for someone, but you're also testing out some, new tool that you want to include in that, and you run into pain points. So like a lot of this can be frustrating, and you spend a lot of time on it, and you want others to not have to like be frustrated with it and spend as much time on it. Even though, yes, it's helpful for other developers to know how it's done and how all this stuff works. When there's a lot of pressure, sometimes at least getting there so where they can actually like start writing their code is still helpful. And as long as your documentation is good and you're good at like spreading a culture of learning, which I'm trying to do at my company, then at least you should be able to kind of figure out the rest. So yeah, that was the demo, and now I should actually be able to. Oh, also, because I have it set to generate my clients. If you look at my so I have this test target. I also have this generate client target. So say I wanted my weather controller to be my final, to be like the final thing that I do. I can just. So it's dependent on compile. So I could just run generate client, and that should be able to do a restore for me. So I'm just going to do that. So and you can see it's doing the restore compile, and now it's generating my client. So it's basically going to create another project. And so if you could see, it created another directory. And inside of it, it's creating a class library. Or at least that's what it's starting with. There's some defaults that it's going to remove and add. And then it also packs automatically, because you just want to generate. So like, instead of having to write out your clients, you just want them to see what you already have and create a client off of it. And it should be, maybe I just have to refresh it. It should be in this folder. Hold on. I hope it's not making a liar out of me.
It's on the file, and then synchronize something. File in the menu.
Wait,
top.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this. I actually haven't used either.
The fourth reload all from disk, I think. Fourth from the top.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, okay, yeah. So it actually created this like interim JSON file that it kind of like, it outputs and then consumes. That's like a whole other topic. So I'm not going to go into that. You don't need it once the client is generated. And so you could see you have a generated client. There's probably some things that I can tweak in the actual like how it gets generated, but you have it here. You can use it. So that's pretty much it. So like you have all of that. And if you decided to, not include automation, and then later on decide you wanted Terraform, I do have it in the template pack that I showed you earlier that just allows you to add that specific file or that specific folder into your project. So you don't have to actually have full solutions in your template. You can actually just have specific files or even like configuration files that you might need. Maybe not right when you create the service, but later. So as far as the demo, I think that's it. Let me go back to my presentation. Current side. And yeah, so in conclusion, .NET U can save your company lots of time. So go template all these things. I actually had a lot of fun with it. It's very satisfying to be able to do this and see how well you can customize it. Because like I only give it a few parameters, but there's so much more that you can do. And so it could be really useful for like streamlining that service creation for other people. And of course, like DevOpsDays was already mentioned, but I kind of want to just kind of bring it back to that. And it's awesome, and you should totally come join us. Thank you. So are there any questions, concerns, comments? I know some of it I kind of went fast. Some of it I didn't explain very well. But as far as like the templating piece, anything? Oh, Q is raising your hand. Oh my God, there's 14 people in chat. Claps. Yes, Q. Oh wait, those are claps. I thought you were raising your hand.
Those are claps.
Sorry.
No,
yeah,
no, I was trying to be non-invasive and clap. You did good.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you. And with that, I guess I'll bring it back to Tyler.
Well, thank you very much.